Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Okay, let's zoom in on a topic that is simultaneously one of the most boring and maybe the most critical barrier to entry in aviation today.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Command and control. The C2 link for beyond visual line of sight, or BVLOS operations.
It's the invisible tether. And the irony is, everyone's focused on the aircraft, the sensors, the cool autonomous flight planning.
Right, the flashy stuff.
But the entire house of cards just rests on that C2 link. BVLOS is where the rubber meets the road for scaling drone ops.
We're talking delivery, infrastructure inspection, large-scale mapping.
All of it. And you just can't scale safely without proving that your C2 link is, it's a predictable, dependable safety system. It's not just a data pipe.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We pulled together a whole stack of sources. We've got the FAA's seminal proposed Part 108 rulemaking.
Which is, just to be clear, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, the NPRM, from late 2025.
Exactly. And we've got industry standards like RTCA, DO 377A, and even practical guidance from Transport Canada.
Our goal here is really to synthesize all of this. We want you to walk away not just, knowing the jargon,
right,
but understanding the crucial technical thresholds, the latency metrics, the dropout probabilities, and really the exact regulatory framework you are expected to operate in.
Whether you're in the US or Canada, this is your shortcut to mastering that C2 safety case.
It is.
So let's start by establishing the stakes. When you're flying visual line of sight, VLOS, if your radio glitches, you can see the drone.
You've got your hands and eyes on it. You can save the day.
You recover manually, you do an immediate visual landing, but shift that operation 10 miles away, over a mountain.
Or into a dense urban canyon. The whole dynamic just changes entirely.
Fundamentally.
Yeah, in BVLOS, the C2 link is the operator's lifeline, period. If that link degrades or fails, you lose your only source of awareness and your only means to, inject a timely command.
There's no visual backup.
None. And a link failure isn't just a failed mission. It can cascade into delayed safety interventions, missed commands, and potentially an uncontrollable flyaway.
What's fascinating to me is the regulatory shift here. The industry's being forced to treat the C2 link like a primary flight control system.
Which it is, essentially, yeah.
It's no longer about whether you have 5 bars of signal.
No, it's about whether that signal guarantees predictable control at a very specific performance level.
Right.
And to set the stage for that, there's a concept we use to define this relationship. It's the distinction between the remote pilot and the autopilot.
Okay.
The remote pilot, think of that as the brain. It's making strategic plans, overriding missions, managing the legal authority.
And the autopilot?
And the autopilot is the spinal cord. It's doing real-time stabilization, keeping the body upright. And crucially, it's managing the reflex actions when that lifeline breaks.
So brain versus spinal cord. That's a great way to put it.
And that whole understanding of distributed control is really foundational to everything in the FAA's proposed Part 108 framework.
So let's crack that open, this idea of distributed control. When the aircraft is miles away doing its thing, where does the actual, the legal control reside versus the physical execution?
That is the perfect place to start. We're dealing with what we call the dual nature of control, on-drone versus off-drone. They work together, but they serve completely different masters.
Okay, let's start with the human side then, off-drone control.
So this is the legal and the authoritative layer. It rests squarely with the remote pilot and their ground control station, the GCS. This layer holds all the legal responsibility.
The human in the loop.
The human in the loop, or maybe a sophisticated GCS acting as their proxy, but this is where all the strategic command decisions are made. Setting the route, changing the mission, managing complex contingencies, and if it comes to it, flight termination. The GCS is the final decision maker.
But the aircraft isn't just a dumb puppet waiting for instructions. It's executing. That's the on-drone control part.
Exactly. This is the execution and stability layer. The autopilot system is performing all that high-frequency, real-time stabilization.
Keeping the wings level, managing engine speed.
Compensating for wind gusts, all of that. But more critically for BVLOS safety, it's executing those pre-programmed contingency behaviors when the link degrades or fails. This is the reflex.
The spinal cord.
The spinal cord takes over. The system is designed so that when that invisible tether is severed, the aircraft autonomously performs its safe predetermined action, or SPA. It doesn't wait for the human brain to tell it what to do. The immediate emergency response is automatic.
That distinction, strategic command versus tactical reflex, is so important for understanding the safety requirement. Sure. Okay, so let's move to the language. The regulator, the FAA, is using in Part 108. These definitions really solidify the framework.
Right, so first the C2 link itself. Proposed Part 108 defines it very precisely as the data link connecting the unmanned aircraft and the GCS for managing the flight.
And notice that word, managing.
Yes, it implies continuous human oversight capability, even if you're not doing continuous intervention.
And the physical thing the pilot uses is the GCS.
The GCS, the ground control station, is just the associated element that communicates with and controls the UA. But the FAA quickly moves beyond just the controller to a much broader concept, associated elements.
This is where the scope expands dramatically, isn't it?
Absolutely. The FAA's proposed definition of associated elements, it covers everything not physically attached to the airframe that is required for safe operation.
So not just the GCS.
Oh, no. It's the GCS, all your ground antennas, the network infrastructure, so your cellular provider, your satellite link provider, flight planning software, fleet management tools.
Wait a minute. So if I'm using, say, a third-party cloud-based service for dynamic airspace awareness that my pilot uses to make decisions, that system is now an associated element in my safety case.
Potentially, yes. That significantly expands who is responsible for system integrity.
Wow.
It forces operators to include their entire communications and data ecosystem in their safety case. If a component is required for safe flight across normal, abnormal, and emergency operations, it's an associated element and you have to prove its reliability.
The FAA is basically acknowledging that modern BVLOS safety is distributed across all these networks, not just in a box on the drone.
Exactly. And none of this works without continuous data exchange. That's the two-way flow requirement.
Right, both ways.
Precisely. Part 108 proposes the aircraft must be able to receive commands. That's the uplink and transmit status info, the downlink to those associated elements. Both are non-negotiable for safety.
Because if you lose the uplink,
you lose command authority.
And if you lose the downlink,
you lose situational awareness. You don't know the aircraft's health, its location, or if it's in a dangerous state. A loss in either direction compromises the entire safety architecture.
This brings us to a really critical distinction that trips up a lot of people moving from recreational to commercial, BVLOS. It's the idea of CNPC versus payload.
We have to be crystal clear on this. What data is life support and what data is just mission success.
Okay, so define CNPC.
CNPC stands for Control and Non-Payload Communications. This is the safety critical data path. It includes your command inputs, turn left, climb, and your critical telemetry position, altitude, battery health, motor status.
And payload is everything else.
Yeah, payload communications is usually your video stream, the sensor data, the high-res imagery you are hired to collect.
So why does this distinction need to be spelled out so rigidly by regulators?
Because of a very common, very dangerous misconception, which is, I can see the video, so my C2 link must be fine.
I've heard that so many times.
It ignores the underlying technical mechanism, which is traffic prioritization, often done through quality of service protocols, or QoS.
Let's get into that. How is the CNPC link assured while the video link might be compromised?
Think of it like a two-lane highway. Your video stream is huge. It consumes massive bandwidth, and it's often buffered really heavily to smooth out jitter and latency so the human eye sees a continuous image.
That buffering can hide a lot of network stress.
A lot. In contrast, your CNPC packets are tiny, they're urgent, they're time-critical. In a modern C2 system, that CNPC traffic gets absolute priority. It's flagged with specific QoS parameters in the network layer, which means those tiny command packets bypass the big buffer queues that the video encoder is using.
So even if the network is getting congested and video is stacking up in a buffer, giving you high latency video, the safety critical command packets get a free pass.
They get immediate right away. The video stream is best effort. If the network slows down, video quality degrades or freezes, but the CNPC has to be guaranteed delivery with minimal latency.
So your video feed might look beautiful, playing off a buffer from a second ago.
While your real-time command link is functionally dead because it can't meet its latency requirement, BVLOS safety relies entirely on CNPC integrity, not on the quality of your sensor payload.
Okay, so we've established the C2 link is this safety-critical tether. But how do we actually quantify safety in a radio link? It seems to boil down to three core measurable variables: reaction time, signal quality, and continuity. Let's start with the most intuitive one: reaction time or latency.
Latency is the single best measure of system responsiveness. It's the time elapsed from when a command is generated at the GCS to when the aircraft acknowledges it and executes the action.
And it covers the telemetry coming back too.
Crucially, yes, high latency just compromises the reaction time of the whole system. It makes timely intervention impossible.
Now, the FAA in Part 108 isn't mandating a single latency number across the board, but the industry relies heavily on established standards to define what's safe. What are we talking about from sources like RTCA D0377A?
Right, we look to performance-based standards like those from the RTCA, and these documents, they break down functions based on urgency. For the most critical communicate functions, the urgent stuff like an emergency ascent or flight termination, the target for one-way latency is often cited as less than 0.155 seconds.
155 milliseconds. That's incredibly aggressive when you think about all the stages a packet has to go through.
It is tight. From the GCS computer, through the OS, over the network, into the receiver, through the flight controller CPU.
It's a lot of steps.
And that tightness is driven by pure physics and required reaction distance. To put that 155 milliseconds in perspective, imagine a BVLOS drone traveling at a moderate speed, say 50 knots. That's about 85 feet per second.
Okay.
During that 155 millisecond delay, the aircraft covers nearly 13 feet.
Wow.
That 13 feet is the minimum distance the drone will drift after the pilot sends an urgent stop command and before the aircraft even begins to process it.
So if you're inspecting a bridge pylon or trying to avoid something, that delay literally dictates your minimum safe reaction distance.
Exactly. That context makes the number real. It proves latency is a physical safety buffer, and it's important to know the components of that delay. You've got propagation delay speed of light processing delay, the CPUs, and most critically, queuing delay.
Time waiting and network buffers.
Right. And in cellular C2, that's usually the biggest variable, and it's the one QoS tries to minimize for CNPC traffic.
Okay, moving on from latency, let's talk signal quality. Yeah, this is a great phrase. Managing link margin, not bars. Why are the signal bars on my controller basically useless for a BVLOS safety assessment?
Because signal bars, or raw RSSI received signal strength indicator, they only measure the strength of the carrier. They tell you nothing about the noise or interference that's present.
So a strong signal that's getting hammered by interference is useless.
It's unusable. What operators have to focus on is the link margin.
And how do you define link margin in, engineering terms?
Link margin is the difference, measured in decibels, dB, between the signal strength you need for minimum usable communication, that's your receiver sensitivity, and the signal strength you're actually receiving.
So it's your headroom.
It is your safety headroom. To figure this out, you calculate a link budget, which balances transmitter power, antenna gains, all your losses against the receiver sensitivity and the noise level. You need a positive link margin, usually 6 dBs or more, to be safe.
So if my minimum usable signal is minus 105 dBm and I'm getting minus 95 dBm, I've got a healthy 10 dB link margin.
Precisely.
But if it drops to minus 104 dBm, I'm at the edge of the cliff.
You are. And this is why regulators, including proposed Part 108, require operators to verify coverage and availability. It's not enough to say the link works. You have to prove you maintain an acceptable link margin throughout the entire route.
Which means monitoring more sophisticated metrics, like for cellular.
Yes. For a simple RF link, you'd focus on signal-to-noise ratio, or SNR. For cellular links, which are way more complex, you monitor metrics like RSRP, which is your raw signal strength, but more importantly, via NR, signal to interference plus noise ratio.
Okay, so let's break that down. Why is that the true measure of link quality for BVLOS?
Because SINR dictates your data capacity and reliability. It tells the cellular modem what modulation encoding scheme, or MCS, it can use.
Okay.
If your SINR is high, you can use a high-order MCS, transmitting lots of data, including your CNPC, very efficiently and quickly. If your SINR suddenly drops, say, from urban interference, the system immediately drops to a lower-order MCS.
So the link is still connected?
The link might still be connected, but the data rate just falls off a cliff, which means the system can't transmit as many CNPC packets, which compromises your heartbeat and your mission awareness. High SINR guarantees low latency.
Right.
Low SINR guarantees link degradation.
So link margin is your reserve tank, and SINR is the oxygen level in that tank.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, that's super clear. Now let's define the boundary between an operational wobble and a safety failure. Dropouts versus a lost link.
Right. A dropout is just a momentary lapse, a short interruption, maybe a few hundred milliseconds, where the link comes back before your defined safety timeout. It's an expected imperfection.
But a lost link.
A lost link happens the moment that interruption lasts longer than your critical, defined link timeout threshold. That is the moment the system switches from operational mode into emergency mode.
What are the industry targets for that kind of continuity?
They're extremely high. The commonly cited goal is that interruptions should be no longer than 3 seconds, with a very, very high probability, often quantified as 0.99999 per flight hour.
So one event leading to a lost link every 100,000 flight hours.
Statistically, yes. It's a massive number, and it shows the level of robustness required.
Yeah.
In BVLOS safety testing, operators have to track offline time meticulously. And once that cumulative offline time exceeds the tolerance, it becomes a critical failure. That 3,000 milliseconds is the difference between a glitch and a declared autonomous safety emergency.
So we've reached that moment of truth. The link is timed out, the system has declared an emergency, and the autopilot spinal cord has to take over.
The trigger is the link timeout. And the FAA's proposed rule and the industry standards, they all recognize that the exact number for that timeout will be operationally dependent.
So it's not one size fits all.
No. It may vary based on the operations risk, the aircraft's speed, its maneuverability. A fast, fixed-wing UAV over an empty field needs a much shorter timeout than a slow multi-rotor inspecting a power line up close.
And we noted earlier, both directions of communication are critical. So we have to address both uplink versus downlink timeout.
We do, because they lead to different safety risks. If you lose the uplink from the GCS to the UA, the pilot loses the ability to command. You can't inject a stop, a turn, a termination command.
And if you lose the downlink,
you lose situational awareness. You can't confirm the aircraft's position, speed, or health. In a BVLOS setting, either one is grounds for an emergency procedure. If you can't see the status, you can't manage the flight. If you can't send commands, you can't control it.
So once that trigger is pulled, the system has to execute the safe, predetermined action, the SPA. This is the big regulatory safety net.
It is the bedrock of autonomous safety assurance. Proposed Part 108 mandates that the aircraft must execute a safe, predetermined action upon reaching link timeout. It's the crucial onboard mechanism that ensures the aircraft fails predictably and safely with zero human intervention.
What are some common examples of an SPA, and how do you decide which one is the safest one?
Well, the FAA suggests options like return to home, RTH, loiter hold, continue flight to a pre-planned safe landing area, or, in a really high-risk scenario, flight termination.
This is a controlled crash.
An intentional controlled crash in a designated safe area, yes. And the definition of safe is entirely context-dependent. RTH is often the default, but if RTH requires the aircraft to climb 500 feet and fly over a newly restricted area or a populated zone,
then RTH is actually the unsafe action.
Exactly. So the operator, during the pre-flight risk assessment, has to simulate these worst-case drift and failure scenarios and define the optimal reflex for that specific bit of terrain.
So the SPA is only as good as the pre-flight hazard analysis.
That's right. And that planning process forces a sophisticated, tiered approach to operational procedures. We call it the degradation ladder. It's all about reacting to symptoms, not waiting for the fatality.
Right.
Professional BVLOS requires defined, practiced procedures for link degradation before the timeout is even reached.
Okay.
So we break it into 3 simple color tiers.
Okay.
First, green. Normal. Everything's healthy, link margin is robust, latency is low, telemetry is stable. You proceed with the mission.
Easy enough.
Then, yellow, degraded. This is the mandatory warning zone. You're seeing rising latency, intermittent dropouts, or your signal quality metrics are trending toward the minimum. Immediate operational actions are required here.
What kind of actions are we talking about in the yellow zone?
The pilot has to slow the aircraft down, which reduces the distance covered during any delay. Maybe change altitude, often climbing improves link geometry and gets you out of terrain shadowing.
Okay.
And most critically, the pilot has to prepare contingency. You run through the checklist for RTH or loiter, you notify people you're buying time.
And the final tier.
I read, critical. You're rapidly approaching the link timeout threshold, or the latency has spiked so severely that any command you send is dangerously delayed. The action here is non-negotiable. Immediate transition to contingency.
You execute the SPA. You abort the mission.
You execute the SPA, and you do not continue deeper into the route, further away from safe airspace or reliable link zones. That tiered approach is the difference between a controlled emergency and an unmitigated incident.
So the FAA's proposed Part 108 is really the framework for moving BVLOS out of this bespoke waiver system and into something scalable and repeatable. And the mechanism they propose to enforce C2 reliability is this communications assessment.
Yeah, the communications assessment requirement. And it sounds like a paperwork exercise, but from all the industry feedback we've seen, this is a huge technical and financial hurdle.
It's the operator's burden of proof.
It is. It's formalized into a document that must be acceptable to the administrator. And it's not a checklist. It's a full-on engineering analysis and a defensible safety argument. For most operators, this means significant capital and operational expense before they even fly their first commercial BVLOS flight.
So what exactly does this assessment have to prove to be acceptable?
It has to comprehensively prove 4 interconnected safety pillars for your specific operating area. First, a full C2 analysis of that environment, identifying interference, multipath effects, all the challenges.
Oops.
Second, documented proof of C2 coverage and availability along the whole route, verified by field testing and RF modeling, ensuring your link margin is always met.
Third,
A robust C2 monitoring plan, which defines how you'll actively detect an alarm when you hit that yellow status.
and fourth.
And fourth, detailed loss link procedures, including the specific context-aware SPAs for different segments of the route.
I have to challenge the feasibility here a bit. If I'm a smaller commercial operator doing this level of RF engineering and field testing for every new pipeline corridor, that seems prohibitive. Doesn't this create a huge economic barrier to scaling?
That is a critical point of industry feedback on the NPRM. The FAA is effectively saying, if you want the economic benefits of BVLOS, you must accept the technical discipline of high assurance communication.
It's forcing the industry to mature.
It is. Simple consumer-grade links just won't pass. You need infrastructure-grade, defensible engineering data. For smaller operators, this probably means partnering with specialized RF engineering firms or choosing routes that are inherently easier to prove, like those relying on licensed satellite links instead of patchy cellular.
And this heightened requirement leads directly to probably the most controversial part of the proposal: spectrum constraints and risk management.
They are sending a very loud signal here. The proposal states that for Category 2 operations over people, the C2 link cannot use RF devices operating under 47 CFR Part 15.
Let's define that. Part 15 devices are the unlicensed spectrum. We're talking 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, 5.8 gigahertz, Bluetooth, a lot of off-the-shelf drone links.
Exactly. And the rule for Part 15 is that devices must accept interference from others, and they can't cause harmful interference. They're best effort.
And the FAA is saying best effort isn't good enough when flying over people.
That's the implication. For higher risk density operations, they believe best effort communication is fundamentally insufficient.
This is a monumental decision. Part 15 devices are often the most affordable and widely used C2 solutions. Doesn't this restriction effectively mandate much more expensive, often custom hardware for anyone wanting to scale high-density ops?
It absolutely raises the economic bar. The FAA is pushing operators toward higher assurance managed links, so licensed spectrum or sophisticated cellular links with guaranteed QoS agreements with carriers, or really robust frequency hopping technologies. The message is clear. When you increase risk to people, you have to move out of the shared highway and into a reserved managed lane.
And that speaks to the overall architectural requirement for system integrity and training. A high-quality link is useless if it can be hacked.
Right. Part 108 expects stringent cybersecurity protections for the whole UAS ecosystem, all those associated elements. You have to guard against GPS spoofing, command injection, jamming.
Because a link might look healthy, but if it's sending bad commands, it's just as dangerous as a broken one.
Precisely. And the human element has to be trained for all of this. Part 108 mandates training on assignment and transfer of control, which is critical for fleet operations where control gets handed off. The pilot needs to know the C2 system inside and out, especially those degradation ladder thresholds. The most likely place for a failure to become a catastrophe is during a complex maneuver or a stressful handoff.
The global push toward BVLOS means we aren't operating in a vacuum. So let's compare the U.S. proposal with the approach from our neighbors to the north, Canada, because they share a fundamental conceptual unity on safety.
They absolutely agree on the core principles: C2 reliability, verifiable performance, predictable loss link behavior, all non-negotiable. Both require contingency planning and documented proof.
But their regulatory philosophies are a bit different, especially for getting started in lower-risk BVLOS.
They really diverge there, yeah.
Let's start with Canada's geography-gated approach.
So Canada decided that certainty was paramount for its initial scalable BVLOS path. They introduced a pathway for lower-risk BVLOS called Level 1 Complex Operations, but it is rigidly constrained by location to minimize the impact of any failure.
And what are those hard geographic limits?
The operation has to meet 3 specific constraints. 1, it has to be in uncontrolled airspace, Class G.
Okay.
2, it must be flown at or below 400 feet AGL. And 3, it has to adhere to specified distances from aerodrome centers.
So they basically drew a very clean, simple box on the map. If you stay inside that box, you have a clear path.
Exactly. It offers clear regulatory certainty. If you're inspecting a remote power line far from an airport, low to the ground, the path is relatively defined. But as soon as you step outside that box,
If you want to fly in controlled airspace or over a city.
you immediately fall under the jurisdiction of a Special Flight Operations Certificate, or SFOC, which is a much more complex, bespoke safety case, similar to the old U.S. waiver process. Canada manages risk by geographically isolating it.
So how does that contrast with the proposed U.S. system, the assessment-driven approach?
The U.S. system is trying to be geographically agnostic. It's focusing on system performance assurance, so it's defined less by a map and more by the operator's ability to conduct and submit that highly detailed, data-driven communication assessment.
So the U.S. is essentially saying you can fly over an urban area if you prove, through meticulous engineering and testing, that your C2 link meets the highest standards.
That's the trade-off, even if it means buying expensive protected spectrum links. Canada gives you certainty in a small docks, the U.S. gives you flexibility everywhere, but at the cost of much higher documentation and technical assurance requirements.
Especially that ban on Part 15 links for high-risk flights.
Right. The burden of proof shifts heavily onto the operator's engineering team.
So if Canada sets a clear geographic box, and the U.S. relies on expensive technical documentation, which method do you think is better positioned to handle exponential growth in BVLOS 5 years from now?
That's the million-dollar question. Canada's approach is fast and safe for low-complexity BVLOS. It allows for rapid adoption in rural areas. But for true urban scalability, think millions of package deliveries, the U.S. performance-based approach, while complex and costly upfront, is probably the only way forward.
If the C2 reliability is proven on a system level.
It should theoretically be scalable everywhere, as long as the assessment holds up. The U.S. model is betting on engineering, the Canadian model is betting on geography.
And what about accountability? What happens when a C2 link fails in Canada?
This is very powerful. Canada has a very stringent post-incident requirement. If C2 link performance issues adversely affect operations, so any event that risks public safety, the operator is legally required to immediately cease all similar operations.
An immediate operational freeze.
Yes, until a full analysis is done and documented corrective actions are taken to mitigate recurrence. It prevents systemic failures from being replicated across a whole fleet. It's accountability formalized.
Okay, let's apply all of this C2 knowledge to a couple of classic operational scenarios. This is where the technical stuff translates into actual procedures.
Right. Let's start with a common one. Scenario: the rural inspection dead zone. A pilot is flying a 12-kilometer pipeline corridor using cellular C2, and they're anticipating patchy coverage in a couple of deep valleys where terrain shadowing is a known issue.
This is the perfect test case for the communications assessment.
It is. The pilot must pre-map those expected dead zones using RF modeling and field testing. The required action is to define abort gates' predefined geographic points just before the dead zone, where the link quality must be verified to be green.
And if the link is yellow or red at the abort gate,
The mission stops, or the aircraft enters its SPA immediately. Period.
and the SPA has to be smart for that terrain.
Absolutely. In a valley, RTH might fail because the aircraft might have to climb through the dead zone just to regain a signal. A better SPA might be an immediate loiter at a safe predetermined altitude, or even a steep descent to a safe landing zone you identified in the planning phase. The goal is simple. Don't fly deeper into the problem.
Okay, next scenario. Urban drone in a box. The pilot is 200 miles away in a remote GCS, which is an associated element. The drone launches on its own for a rooftop inspection.
This is the ultimate test of that distributed control system. The key C2 reality here is that the system has to be entirely resilient to human absence. If the link drops from urban canyon interference, network failure, whatever, the aircraft must immediately enter its SPA.
And that failure sequence has to be proven to work without any human input.
End to end, yes. This scenario relies not just on the radio link, but on the integrity and cybersecurity of all those associated elements connecting the pilot 200 miles away. The autonomous failsafe is the pilot's safety mechanism.
It really emphasizes that the onboard component, the autopilot and the SPA, carries the vast majority of the immediate critical safety burden in these scaled operations.
It carries the immediate risk mitigation burden. The pilot carries the legal and regulatory responsibility for ensuring that onboard system is flawlessly designed to handle the worst-case scenario.
So let's use this to tackle some persistent misunderstandings, our myth-busting session. Myth #1. BVLOS means the drone is autonomous, so the link isn't critical.
Fact. False. The FAA explicitly defines the C2 link as necessary to manage the flight. While the drone executes its mission autonomously, the human authority remains off-board and must have the ability to intervene. Autonomy handles the routine. The C2 link handles the non-routine and the emergencies.
Right. If the link isn't critical, why does losing it trigger the highest level of emergency protocol?
Exactly.
Myth #2. If I've got video, I've got C2.
We have to stress this again. Fact. It's a dangerous assumption. CNPC, your safety comms, is separate from your payload comms, your video. High-quality video often means your link is heavily buffered, which can mask underlying congestion. That video feed is a potential mirage of safety.
So the video can look perfect while your control link is actually compromised.
Absolutely.
Myth #3. Lost link always equals return to home.
Fact. RTH is an option, but the safe predetermined action must be context-aware. If RTH routes the aircraft over new hazards, like an unexpected crowd or restricted airspace, it's the unsafe action.
The SPA has to be defined during planning for that specific piece of sky.
It could be loiter, it could be continue to a safe landing zone, it could be flight termination. The critical part is that the action must be proven safe for that context.
And that leads to one final point we need to address: the danger of an intermittent link. Most people think a total blackout is the worst problem. Why is a flickering link often more dangerous?
Because it targets the most unreliable component in the system, the human pilot's judgment, intermittent loss, the link dropping in and out, latency spiking. It creates pilot hesitation. The pilot sees the link flicker back and thinks, maybe I can save it, I'll just wait one more second.
And that hesitation is deadly.
It delays the critical, immediate decision to execute the SPA, and that brief delay allows the aircraft to drift faster and further, potentially turning a manageable system failure into an unrecoverable incident. BVLOS safety has to be threshold-driven. Metrics hit red, action is mandatory, not based on a hopeful subjective vibe.
This whole deep dive into C2 links for BVLOS really clarifies the regulatory evolution. We're moving from a flexible, kind of hobbyist mindset to a rigorous engineering-led discipline.
Absolutely.
If we condense the core requirements for you, we really have the SL rule and the 2W plus SPA rule.
The SLL rule is signal latency loss. Can you maintain sufficient link margin? Signal. Is your reaction time latency acceptable? And what happens when loss occurs?
And the 2W plus SPA rule.
That's the regulatory mandate. Two-way comms for continuous management, plus a robust, safe, predetermined action executed automatically at timeout.
So the overriding signal from the FAA's proposed Part 108 is that BVLOS safety hinges entirely on documented proof that communication assessment that your C2 link functions as a highly reliable, predictable system under stress.
It demands systems discipline, financial investment in robust comms, and meticulous pre-flight hazard analysis.
And as we discussed, for higher-risk operations over people, the FAA is explicitly demanding that safety-critical C2 links move away from those unlicensed, interference-prone Part 15 devices.
Right. And this raises a final provocative thought for everyone.
Okay.
If the BVLOS future is one of millions of simultaneous drone operations, is it truly sustainable for regulators to rely on this complex, costly, system-by-system safety case built on shared and congested airwaves? Or will the sheer volume and safety requirements eventually demand a global consensus to dedicate and reserve an entirely separate frequency spectrum, a kind of secured digital railroad with mandatory assurance levels for all safety-critical command and control?
So moving from shared airwaves to a dedicated C2 utility.
That institutional move might be the ultimate step required to guarantee scalable nationwide BVLOS safety and unlock the true economic potential of this industry.
That is a powerful challenge for the global regulatory community moving forward.
That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.